Well, hey there, cross-cart fans or independent rear suspension fans. Today's a huge day. We're going to make an independent rear suspension center spool axles, the entire setup. Not only is it for my carts, but it is a universal application. Let's just get started on it. So first things first, you're going to need an axle. Now this is a hardened steel splined axle for the PTO of a tractor. This sucker is beefy. Now what we need to do is we need to cut it because this is too long to make a long travel suspension. So cut it in half, and you're going to drill and tap each end. Now if you're uncomfortable doing this, take it to a machine shop. They have the proper tools to get this aligned. They can do it on a lathe, but the center is soft enough. On hardened steel, the outside is strong. The center is still somewhat soft, but you don't need that to be strong. This has worked out really well. Next, you'll need to cut a piece of this off. Now, I got a long piece of this because I intend to make more of these in the future because I like building this stuff. Now, all of the lengths, measurements, details of all the things are in the plans. Check the description. Everything you need is in there. And watch the video for the assembly. Now this might be optional, but I do it anyway just to clean this up really nice before we do the next step. And this is just a cylinder hone with a soft, and I just run it for a few seconds. Now the idea is not to remove any of the metal, it's just to get it nice and smooth in there, like a cylinder. You want it smooth. Alright, so we've got our main housing cut, we've got our axle cut. Now the next thing to do, and I like to take one of the hubs, and that just holds it in place nice for you. Next thing we're going to do is get the correct measurement for our spacer. Now this uses 4 bearings. Bearings make it nice and smooth and buttery. Put our universal hub on, the 4 bearings. Then our other hub, and that gives us a stack, but you see we have some left over. So you need to take a measurement of that. You can use a ruler, you can use the depth finder on your caliper. Calipers are handy. And we're going to cut a spacer to take up that gap so everything sits flush with the axle. So after you cut that, you have your spacer, your 4 bearings, and your 2 hubs, and it should be a completely flush fit. You don't want the axle hanging out any at all above the hub. Now here comes the fun part. We've got a bearing press here. These are actually more affordable than I thought, and I've gotten so much use out of it outside of just doing this. So first I'm going to lube up the main housing here. Just PB Blaster, WD-40, drill press, oil, just anything to get it out, and also just check for burrs. That's pretty nice right there. Now secondly, you're going to need something that fits inside here and also on the metal part of your bearings. You don't want to press on the rubber parts. I got an old socket from my drawer and it just worked out. It's 1 13/16 12 point. And that fits really well and makes pressing easier. Now the first thing we're going to press is the center spacer. So that's just going to fit on there like that. I'm going to lube up the outside of this as well to get it ready. Now you want this centered. You want this exactly centered in your housing. I'm going to start off by just putting a plate on it just to get it started nice and straight. Now we'll just press that all the way until it stops. And you'll feel pressure. This is a 20-ton shop press. So it will definitely stop when it feels tension, and you'll feel it too. So then Lift the press back up. Fit in our gap. Now this is a very specific distance. The tolerances of this whole rear end are fairly low for what it is. So don't be afraid if something's a 16th off. 1/8 off is pushing it a bit. Get that lined up. Now for that specific depth, I just welded on a little tab. So all I gotta do is press this until I get to my tab. An optional way to do it is to press it in a little bit. You can mark the outside distance from your press to there and then check it, and then do it in increments. There we go. See, now I feel tension from that tab, and I'm not going to push it too much, so I'll just stop there, pull this off, and now our spacer is perfectly centered in there. Pretty cool, huh? Now here's an optional step. There's no way to seal that axle with its spline. It's a specialized part, and we're not using any specialized part. So what I'm doing is I'm going to install a Zerk fitting and just fill this whole thing with grease. That'll keep the water from getting between the splines and into the bearings. The bearings are sealed, but you don't want stagnant water sitting in your rear end. Now, give it a good clean out. You don't want any metal flakes in there, any metal dust. You want this to stay very, very clean. It's going to keep your bearings nice. It's going to add to the longevity of your rear end. There we go. That's just going to be 2 bearings in each side. Alright, so we've got our splined axle. It's been drilled and tapped on both ends. We've got our universal hubs. We've got our main housing with bearings pressed in, and we've got a Zerk fitting so we can pack it full of grease. Now what's next? These are what's next. Not only do the plans include the exact measurements of everything you need to build this, but it also includes the DXF files for these to be sent off and laser cut and shipped to your door so that you can have a very, very nice rear end assembly. And here's how to do that. All right, so here's how to get the laser cut parts sent right to your door. Google or just go right to Send Cut Send. I've used these guys a lot and they are awesome. Their parts are great. Their shipping is free and fast, and they are awesome to work with. So hit Get Started. Cancel that. Now it's as easy as dropping your files right in there. So here's everything that's included in the plans. It walks you through everything you need. It gives you the hardware needed, the measurements for everything, press depths, plenty of pictures to get this exactly how it needs to be done for your cart. So you'll see 2 folders. There's 420 chain setup and there's 520, 530 chain setup. I split it into 2 different ones. This is for Predator, Duramax, Tillotson motors that use a 420 chain, or number 40 chain, number 41, whatever it is. And then there's the 520, 530, which is ATV or motorcycle sprockets. Since most people are probably going to use motorcycles or ATVs, I'll walk you through that. In here you'll see a make two, and then the rest. Make two means make 2. So drag this in here. You'll see it processing it. There's the part. Now this is a Miata axle grease cap spacer. You need 2 of those, 1 for each side. We're going to make it out of metal because it's the cheapest. Steel, mild steel, and you want an 1/8 of an inch. Since there's not an 1/8 of an inch, you've got the choice between these 2. Either will work. select 2 because it says make 2. Quantity 2. Add more drawings. We're going to make 2 of these as well. Drag it right in there. And these are going to be the lower mounting brackets. You want one for left and one for right. Make 2. Metal, steel, mild steel. Now we're going to make this either out of 3/16 or 1/4 inch. Up to you what you want to do. If you have a high power setup, definitely go 1/4 inch. I go with 3/16 because it's what I know, it's what I've used. It's plenty strong and it's easy to weld. We'll get these loaded in here. We'll walk you through one by one. So the brake side bracket I do is 3/16. Obviously go thicker if you are going to have higher horsepower. You just need one of those. Now the end plates. Now I get these cut as 1/4 inch. That way when you're welding on the universal hub, it's not going to warp. It's strong enough. You probably could go thinner. I think I do 3/16 for the 420 chain. You probably could get away with 3/16, but you're only going to build it once, right? And then just load the rest of these in here. 3/16 for the bracket or 1/4 inch if you're using high power. 1/4 inch for the end plate, and I'll put all this in the plans. Now this is an optional sprocket spacer. Now this is for if you're having trouble aligning your front sprocket and rear sprocket. It goes between the end plate and the sprocket. You can get it cut in up to 1/2 inch increments, and obviously anything in between. I usually get them cut in 1/2 inch. I've stacked 2 of them before and it works out well. This is an optional part. It is not necessary. So you have 6 main pieces and then 1 optional piece. Check up here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 main pieces and 1 optional piece. So we'll check out the cart here. Make sure we have 2 spacers, 2 mounting brackets, 1, 1, 1, and 1, 96, 93 for a super strong laser cut rear end. That's a stellar deal. Just saying. These guys are awesome, and that's I'm pretty sure there's free shipping on all this stuff. And that is how you order the laser cut parts. Let's get back to the assembly. Now I know some of you are thinking, yeah, I can just build this at home. This was a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of trial and error. I guarantee you, if you try to copy this, it's going to cost you more. I'm not trying to pressure you into buying my stuff. I have a normal job. I don't do this for the money. I would give these away, except they're not worthless. So I got to charge a little bit, but my motivation to do this is to get more people building. And I've already done that with my frames. There's so many people building cool carts. I love it. And this is a huge missing piece in the industry. Now, the reason nobody sells these off the shelf is because it's not profitable. It's not lucrative. People just want to make money. It takes time to assemble this stuff. So by showing you guys how to do it, by giving you the parts you need right down to the very last bolt, you guys can save a ton of money, and it's super lucrative to you to build your own versus trying to track down the perfect setup. You guys can do this. This isn't hard. Using a bearing press is super easy. I put it off for a long time, and I finally pulled the trigger and got one, and man, I use it all the time. I love it. So let's get back to the assembly. All right, so the 2 pieces we're going to need are the brake side bracket and the sprocket side bracket. Now the idea is to mount these flush against the sides. I'm just going to use my workbench, throw a tack on there, and I'm going to position my Zerk fitting to where I can get to it, and it's not going to be in the way of anything else. So I'll put it right there and throw some tack welds on this. Now, the tack welds are just to hold it in place. We're going to end up welding this whole thing. And these brackets are made from 3/16 inch plate metal. You can get them made in 1/4 inch if you want, as you saw. So next, we got to do the other side, and we've got to get it flush. So flush against the side is easy, but alignment's not too easy. So I'm going to get the help of a piece of angle iron and my angle finder and a good eyeball. Never discount a good eyeball. That looks pretty perfect right there. There we go. Looks pretty good. So next up is putting the axle in. Now, since we pressed the bearings in, this isn't going to slide into place. It'll slide into the, wow, it slid into the first two. Usually it tweaks it just enough, like that's an exact fit. So once it's pressed in there, you have to coax it the rest of the way, but it presses right in. Check this out. All right, so we want to press it from the sprocket side because we want the sprocket side to be exactly flush. So we'll put our hub in place. We'll get a plate so we know when it is flush. Get two so we don't have to crank it as far. And there we go. This hub is perfectly flush with this side, which means it's going to get the most strength out of this combination of splines. Now with both end pieces tacked and the axle in the correct position, we take our universal hubs, slide them into place, and you can see just how beefy and nice this is. The inner part of this rides on the inner race of the bearing, so nothing's going to grind. The space between here is minimal, so it's going to keep dirt and mud out, keep it from getting caked in there. So the next step is the actual sprocket and rotor end plates. We got a rotor side and a sprocket side. Now this is the one for the 520 or 530 chain, and this is the brake rotor side. They all take the same rotor. Now, if you're using a 420 chain or a Predator engine, which I love. I know you guys don't think I have enough power, but I love them. They're awesome. This fits the 6-bolt pattern for a split sprocket from Go Power Sports. It's super, super nice. So the next thing we need to do with whichever ones you choose is we need to countersink or chamfer the center hole. Let's do it. Now a countersink bit looks like that. You can get them at any hardware store. You take your plate. They don't have a side right now, but as soon as we do this, they will. There you go. It's countersunk. Now the depth of it, you don't want to go all the way through because that bolt hole, or the hole is the same size as the bolt. What you do is want to do it enough to where that sits flush with the plate. Any guesses what we're going to do next? You guessed it. We're going to put the end plate right on the end of here and bolt it in. Now, you do want it tight. Before final assembly, this will be Loctited in there, maybe even a tack weld to hold that in place. There's a lot of vibration back here, and it wants to pull this bolt loose. So, permanent red thread lock has worked so far on all of mine. Now, once that is in place, these holes on the end, the inboard holes that look through to the hub, are weld holes. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some weld in there to hold this in place. Now, eventually, there's going to be a full bead of weld all the way around the universal hub, plus these 4 holes. Now, the strength of this rear end relies highly on your welding ability to this. Now, there's plenty of area for welding, and if you think you need more, you can drill these holes out. This is held up so far on all of mine. Now, this is why I'm not going to build you one either. I'm a certified pilot and aviator. I'm not a certified welder. So, take it to your buddy, have it TIG welded on there. If you're using a Predator, you could probably weld it yourself. You're not shifting gears and downshifting and putting the shock on this. So we'll get these 4 holes welded, lock it in place, and then you can actually pull the hub off to weld that big long bead if you want. Or you can just tack it for your welding shop. So now we've got sprocket side and a rotor side. This is pretty much the finished assembly. Look how nice it is. Oh, these came out so great. Mounting it just to cover the full rear end. Measure this gap. Cut your spacer out of the prescribed tubing. Take your bolt. Slide it on through. And we have a nut. Now, this is just a generic laser cut height for these tabs, and it's the minimal clearance for the tilting action of this. So that's how it mounts. Are those tabs. Now, it's obviously squared up, and all the strength is transferred everywhere throughout this. So that's it. That is your basic rear end. I'll show you how some of the components go on. Now, for the sprocket side, it is a 4x156 bolt pattern. That is the common bolt pattern, or the exact bolt pattern for a Polaris Outlaw 525, which is what got me started in all of this. As you can see, it matches up perfectly. This is a 520 chain. You can get aftermarket sprockets. There's plenty of people that will cut them. They'll cut them in 520. They'll cut them in 530. They will give you any number of teeth that you want. So you can run a big old sprocket. If you're running a motorcycle engine, you don't have to swap to a 520 chain. You can keep it at 530. Also in the plans, if you're having an alignment issue with your motorcycle, you can print out spacers. You can have laser cutters print you some spacers to help you with chain alignment, motor mounting stuff. Pretty easy. These are also stackable. I get them cut in 1/2-inch increments. I did have a 1-inch one cut out of aluminum. This sucker was expensive, and I was very, very angry about it. But I wanted to show you guys the options, and I also used a 1-inch spacer on my 2-seat cross cart. But it is about half the price to get 2 steel spacers versus 1 aluminum spacer. Obviously this is lighter. So brake side, let's check this out. Now the brake is a 2-piston caliper. This is the rear brake for an Outlaw, or it's the front brake for a Polaris Razor. So there's plenty of braking power here. My carts, I can lock up the wheels easily, absolutely easily. And that's how you know you have good brakes, is that if your brakes lock up, it means you have enough force. The rotor has a bolt pattern of 4x156, and it takes M8 bolts, and it is shaped like this. Same with this, so that you can put it on. That helps you with alignment. Putting it on the inside or outside helps you with your rotor alignment. So it's not squeaky, it's not rubbing. The bolts prescribed in the plans are long enough to give you adjustment, and you basically just shim it here so that it is centered over your rotor. All this depends on where you place your axle, your housing. It's modular. The tolerances are semi-low for what we're dealing with, so that you can still have a really nice independent rear suspension rear end. And here you go. Here it is assembled. Now, I didn't shim the brake, but it's just rough to show you guys how well this works. You can mount it anywhere. There's your mounting distance. You could also put the tabs on the inboard side of this. It doesn't matter. And here's that tilting action. Now, the reason it's on a tilt is for chain tension. It's got adjustable chain tension. If you want to swap sprockets, the chain tensioning is done through the tilt. These heim joints and bolts Braided bolts, obviously, are what makes this a 4-point connection. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, making this rear end super, super strong with chain adjustment. Double-sided heims, left and right, make for a tie rod. Ah, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, here's a look at the 420 chain setup for you Yerf Dog guys. Brake, sprocket, all in one piece. Ah, it's so beautiful. So beautiful. I've been working on this for a very, very long time. That's why I'm showing you guys how to build it, so there is no middleman, there is no production company, there is no fat cat needing to get rich. So enjoy the inexpensive plans. Get your setup on independent rear suspension and start hitting some big bumps. So now that you have your center carrier built, check out part 2 where we mount the axles on. We build the hubs to accept Miata axles and even drill the hubs for an ATV bolt pattern so you don't have to use car wheels on your go-kart or buggy. So now it's time for my favorite part, questions. I'll call this the FFAQ, Future Frequently Asked Questions. So just to get a head start on it, first question I always get, will I build you one? No, I won't build you one. I just showed you every step of how to build one, and your first question is, will I build you one? I'm busy. I got a family, I got a full-time job. I do this just for the fun of it, as you know. But I do share my work if it's something that's good. And if I'm building these all the time, I'm not coming up with new cool stuff for you guys to use on your own carts. Second question is going to be, how much does it cost? I just know it. It's going to be, how much is it? How much is it? I know budget pricing is a huge deal. So this was done in the least expensive manner that I could figure out that would be universal for all buggies. All the parts used on it are readily available off the shelf, inexpensive parts. It is a collection of parts. The most expensive part is the axle, $80. The axle is $80 currently. Last time I did a pricing, prices went up, making those estimates inaccurate. So I'll just say around 400 bucks for this spool. Hopefully metal prices go back down and it'll be less. But all the components on here, what you see, around 400 bucks. Hopefully in the future it'll be closer to 3 when everything settles down. Third question, how much power will it hold? So this axle, like I said, is the PTO axle off the tractor. I'm sure it can handle 200 foot-pounds of torque, which translates into 400 horsepower at 6,000 RPM or so. So the axle, the hubs are all made for very, very high power, high torture. Now, what it's going to depend on is your welding. I'm not saying that it's going to fail because it's reliant on welding. There is plenty of weld area to get this to be just as strong as the axle. 1/4 inch plate, super strong. I'm pretty sure an aluminum sprocket would fail before these end plates and these welds fail. Like I said, drill the holes out. If you have a high power application, have your buddy TIG weld it. I did my own welding for my 20 horsepower Predator, and it's held together just fine. Not even a hint of trouble with that. And I don't consider myself a certified welder. I'm a highly adequate hobby welder. So if you're running a small single cylinder engine, maybe even a small ATV engine, you should be fine welding it yourself. But that's up to you. All of this stuff is up to you. Speaking of up to you, you're going to ask me what thickness of plate should use just because I gave you the option. I told you exactly what I use and what I would use. Outside of that, I don't know. It's up to you. I'm sorry I can't help you with every single step of your build. You're going to have to make some decisions somewhere. You can't ask me stuff that I haven't done because I don't know. The answer is going to be, I don't know. I haven't done that. This is what I've done and only what I know. So as far as thicknesses, 3/16 seems to work for me. 1/4 inch for the plates, 3/16 for the smaller Predator engines should work just fine. If you're worried about it, go a little thicker. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything. Another question, am I going to make a differential? No, I'm not going to make a differential. This is my 5th one of these. None of them have differentials. They all have live axles. I don't personally believe they need differentials. That's for big monster off-road trucks with long wheelbases. This has like an 80-inch wheelbase and a 62-inch track width. I pushed this around in my yard. My daughter pushed it around. It has no problems. So if the 10th horsepower of my daughter pushing it around isn't enough to overcome that live axle, then I would look into differentials. But it works fine. Reverse. Am I going to put a reverse on it? I don't know. The carts that I drive that don't have reverse, I drive them like they don't have reverse, and it's not a big issue. The ones that have reverse, if I need it, I'll use it. I am looking into a future mod for this to add possibly an electric like starter gear reverse, but long travel and reverse on a secondary is troublesome, because if you want long travel, you need a narrow center hub. To have electric reverse, you need a little bit of space to put a starter motor, an additional ring gear, all that stuff. So there's give and take on all of this stuff. And if it had reverse, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So this is a budget way to get anyone independent rear suspension. So head on over, check out part 2. We're going to put the axles on, the hubs, the wheel bearing carriers, and I'll talk to you somewhat about plunge, max track width, hub to hub. I'll give you some of the measurements on that and some ideas on trailing arm versus A-arm, that kind of stuff. So I'll see you in part 2. Thanks for watching.